Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. We got a great show for y'all tonight. Got a lot to talk about the NBA playoffs with in the NFL. Le'Veon Bell's bashing Andy Reid, the coach that literally no player bashes. Everybody loves Andy Reid. And Le'Veon Bell just went after him. Going to discuss that in just a second. I'm going to start the show talking about Chris Paul, talking about the Nuggets getting swept by the Phoenix Suns. Also going to discuss Kevin Durant. I've called Kevin Durant the best player in the world for probably about a year and a half now. This is his moment. His two superstars are out. Going to discuss that in depth later on the show. Also, look at this right here. Nikola Jokic was ejected for a flagrant 2. I got a lot of thoughts on that coming up later on the show. But let's start with Chris Paul. Chris Paul was outstanding last night. 37 points, 14 for 19 from the field. Gave you 7 assists. Devin Booker was outstanding as well. Both those guys showed up as they have time and time again throughout these playoffs. And for the first time in 11 years, the last time they were in the playoffs, Phoenix Suns are going to the Western Conference Finals. So congrats to them. They swept the Denver Nuggets. First of all, and I'll get to his all-time rank among point guards if you see the title of the show, if he wins a championship. That's the thing. If he wins a championship, where he ranks, I'm going to get to that in just a quick second. But let me talk about last night in this series in particular. So the MVP was on the floor last night. The media's MVP, Nikola Jokic. Now, let me back up. I've said multiple times in this show that I think Steph Curry should have been the MVP. He's the only dude that was not just getting double-teamed, but getting triple-teamed and still led the league in scoring and still carried a Golden State team, which was the 7th worst offense in NBA history without him on the floor, to the doorstep of the playoffs. It took a 30-footer from LeBron James to beat him in the first playoff game, and a 35-point performance from Ja Morant in the second playing game to eliminate the Warriors, again, with no Klay Thompson and no James Wiseman. I think Steph's the MVP. Obviously, it didn't happen. I think he should have been. I will say this, though. If Chris Paul had gotten voted MVP, wouldn't have had a problem with it. Even if I think Steph should be the MVP, would have not had a problem with it if Chris Paul was the MVP. Keep in mind, we all know about this Phoenix Suns team. Very talented and very well coached. They missed the playoffs last year. And the year before that. And the year before that. And the year before that. And you know the drill. Devin Booker. This is his 6th year in Phoenix. DeAndre Ayton's 3rd year in Phoenix. Monty Williams' 2nd year in Phoenix. Chris Paul's 1st. Last year, they got hot in the bubble. Went 8-0 in the bubble. Almost made the playoffs. Came that close, but Portland barely edged them out to get into that play-in game, which was kind of the introductory kind of experiment that the NBA was using in the bubble last year. So Phoenix barely missed. But pre-bubble, and we're seeing a lot of bubble frauds, Miami, Lakers, Boston. But we saw before the bubble, Phoenix was 26-39. 13 games under 500. That's with Monty Williams. That's with DeAndre Ayton at times. That's with Devin Booker basically the whole season. And they were 13 games under 500. This year, they add Chris Paul, 2nd best record in the NBA, 2 seed out west. Now they're in the conference finals, getting rested to meet either the Utah Jazz or the Los Angeles Clippers. While those two are fighting tooth and nail, Phoenix is resting. They took out the defending champs in round 1, and now they just swept the MVP in round 2. Chris Paul should have been at least 2nd, in my view, for MVP. If he would have won it, would have had no problem with it. But the fact that he didn't even get into the top 3 is a joke. But then again, it says a lot about the MVP voters when Derrick Rose this year gets a first-place vote. Derrick Rose. We ain't talking about 2010 prime Derrick Rose. We're talking about kind of old, definitely has no lift anymore like he used to. Derrick Rose, who wasn't even the best player on his own team. Was he more valuable than Julius Randle? Maybe someone can make an argument about it. He certainly looked like that in the playoffs. But it is a regular season award. And apparently somebody out there, some NBA media person out there thought, hey, you know what, Derrick Rose is the MVP. So that tells you the people that are voting for this award. Not everybody in the media is in the NBA meeting is bad, obviously. But I don't think they understand what the award means. Let's say it together one more time. Most valuable player. Not the guy with the best stats who played the most games. If that's what it is, best stats combined with most amount of games played, sure, Jokic is the MVP. Give it to him. Got no problem with it. But if it's most valuable player, I think it's Steph. But if it was Chris Paul, got no issue with it. Heck, if it was Joel Embiid, I wouldn't have been mad. Nikola Jokic wasn't even the best center. He wasn't even the best player at his own position this year, or the most valuable. Joel Embiid was. Philadelphia wasn't very good when Joel Embiid was hurt. So that's all I'm saying. This Phoenix team, after they beat the Lakers, I said I think the Suns are going to win the Western Conference. And I thought they were going to beat Denver in 5 games. It only took them 4. And so that, I guess that might have been just a little surprise, but I still figured it'd be a pretty quick series. So the fact that Phoenix got it done quickly didn't surprise me that much. Certainly if Jamal Murray was there for Denver, it could have been a much more interesting series. We saw what he did in the playoffs last year, and we saw what he was doing this year at times for them until he unfortunately tore his ACL. So, Denver's going to be here to stay. They got Jokic, Murray. I like Michael Porter Jr. He wasn't great in this series, but he's a kid. He'll get better. Guys like Aaron Gordon were terrible. Guys like Will Barton, I get it. He was hobbled, but that didn't help. So Denver's going to be good for the future. I think Denver has probably the brightest future of any team over the next 5 to 7 years in the Western Conference, because Phoenix, Chris Paul's old. Golden State, 5, 6, 7 years from now, they're not going to be what they are now. The Lakers, LeBron will be retired by then. The Clippers will be the Clippers. Jazz might be their only real adversary. I like Memphis and their direction they're going, but I think it's safe to say Denver is definitely the team to watch these next 5, 6, 7 years, because their 3 stars are not even in the prime yet. So that's definitely something for Nuggets fans to feel good about. But as far as Chris Paul, let's talk about him individually. Now, here's a guy. I sound like Chris Collinsworth there. Here's a guy who started his career in New Orleans, right? And because of the hurricane, by the way, they had to go to Oklahoma City. He led them to the playoffs. Heck, they competed with the Lakers. I think they took the Lakers, 6, 7 games? And that was the Kobe Bryant, Gasol Lakers that ended up winning the championship. Like, I think it was the New Orleans Hornets at the time that Chris Paul was with. They gave them all they could handle, and Chris Paul gave them all they could handle. And then he gets traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, a perennial loser, and he's teamed up with Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan. They ended up adding Paul Pierce later, and J.J. Redick and Jamal Crawford. It was a good team, coached by a great coach in Doc Rivers, and they couldn't get out of the second round. And everybody thought it was Chris Paul's fault, and everybody's defending Blake Griffin. Well, Chris Paul ended up getting traded after that to Houston, and Blake Griffin stayed there, signed a big contract, and nothing happened. And Blake ended up getting traded that season to Detroit, who missed the playoffs. So Chris gets traded to the Houston Rockets, a team whose best player, James Harden, great as he is in the regular season, is as unreliable as they come in the playoffs. We all know that. And so Chris comes in there. Not only do they win 65 games, they are up 3-2 on the fully loaded Golden State Warriors with Steph, Kevin Durant, I'll get into KD later, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steve Kerr on the sidelines. And that Houston Rockets team, with James Harden having a very average series. I've watched, obviously, I'm a Golden State fan. I'm an NBA fan. Watched that series from game 1 to the final buzzer of game 7. James Harden had an average series. And Chris Paul, they were down 2 games. People forget they were down 2-1 to Golden State. They had a big comeback in game 4 on the road, which Chris Paul was the primary reason they won that game. They go home, game 5. They win the game, but Chris Paul pulls his hamstring and is done for the series, and Houston loses the next 2 to the Warriors. I'm not one of the belief that if he plays, Houston would have won. Maybe it's my bias as a Warriors fan. Maybe it's the fact that I believe in the heart of a champion, as cliche as it sounds, in the Splash Brothers, KD and Draymond. I still think Golden State would have won that series. But make no mistake about it, Chris Paul had them sweating, and then some. But he gets hurt. James Harden gets exposed again in the playoffs, and Golden State advances to the finals and ends up sweeping Cleveland. Okay, so a couple of years after that, Chris Paul gets traded to The Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, this is when we thought we buried Chris Paul after this. We're like, he's on a bad contract. At least it looked like that at the time. He's traded to Oklahoma City where he has got, kids or veterans that have bounced around the league. Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, some guy named Lou Dort. Lou Dort's a good defensive player, by the way, but, not an offensive threat. Steven Adams. I mean, it was kind of a weird mix of players. We thought OKC was tanking. Why? Well, they just traded Russell Westbrook and Paul George. So, they traded their two stars. They're tanking. And they're going to trade Chris Paul at midseason. And Chris Paul gets them not only to the playoffs, but as the 5 seed in the Western Conference. Or as I sometimes call it, the Bestern Conference. Because it's the best. West is always the better conference than the East. We all know that. I mean, think about it. Better record than the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers. Okay? And the Dallas Mavericks. With basically kids and a weird mix of veterans. And Chris Paul gets in the playoffs as the 5 seed in the West, and they come that close in a Game 7, a win-or-go-home Game 7 against Houston, to eliminating the Rockets with James Harden and Russell Westbrook and advancing to the second round. And Chris Paul gets traded, and OKC tanks, and they're the third. I think they're actually the second worst team in the West, if I remember correctly. Gets traded to Phoenix, missed the playoffs the last 11 years, and they're the 2 seed. And now they're in the Western Conference Finals. So I looked at the all-time point guards, the all-time great point guards, and I gave a list, top 5. Top 5. Who are the 5 greatest point guards in the history of the NBA if Chris Paul wins a championship? So let's start with number 1. That's the obvious one, Magic Johnson, greatest point guard of all time, without a doubt. We're talking about a 5-time champion, 3-time MVP, 3-time finals MVP, and he made 12 all-star teams. He's the greatest ever. Right, he changed the point guard position. 6'9", it's not fair. He's a 6'9" point guard. He made everybody around him better. You can say, well, he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, he did. But he still had teammates around him that struggled elsewhere, and he made them that much better. That's what a point guard is supposed to do. He's supposed to make other guys around him better. That's what Magic Johnson did. I think he's the second greatest at Laker, which is saying something all time, to Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe is my 4th best player ever, and I got Magic Johnson right behind him. And so Magic's the greatest point guard ever. There's no debate about it. Second, I don't think there's much of a debate about this one. It's Steph Curry. Talking about a 3-time champ, 2-time MVP. One of those was a unanimous MVP. No player's ever done that. And a 7-time All-Star. Steph, while he's not the, classic point guard like a Magic Johnson, like a John Stockton, he still plays the point guard position, a little bit like an Allen Iverson. Their games are obviously vastly different, but not pure point guards, if you will. Nobody's ever shot the ball better than Steph. Nobody's changed the game quite like Steph in regards to three-point shooting and how teams, run their offense nowadays. How guys have changed their games, how bigs have changed their games to keep up with the times. And that Steph Curry did that. I think changing the game, winning 3 championships, 2 MVPs, obviously 7 All-Stars, that constitutes as the second greatest point guard ever to the great Magic Johnson. I think Steph's second all-time. Third all-time, I think it's Isaiah Thomas. I'm talking about a 2-time champ. He won the MVP of the finals one year, and I believe he is also a 12-time All-Star. Now, Isaiah was with, obviously, a team, a controversial team, if you will, the bad boy Detroit Pistons. It had Joe Dumars and Bill Laimbeer and obviously Dennis Rodman. That was a great team. Wasn't always fun to watch back in the late 80s, early 90s, but he was one of the best point guards to ever do it. Obviously winning 2 championships, making other guys around him better. He obviously had the iconic game where he turned his ankle and still, I think, dropped 37. I hope I'm getting that number right. I may not be. But he had moments. He had all-time great moments, which every all-time great is supposed to have. And Isaiah Thomas is 3rd greatest point guard of all time on my list. 4th, I think it's Oscar Robertson. Oscar won a championship, won a Finals MVP in that championship run, and was a 12-time All-Star. I looked at his numbers for his whole career. They're kind of insane. He's averaging 26 points a game, 7 rebounds. I mean, it's crazy. Or I think it's 7 assists. He was known as the triple-double king before Russell Westbrook. Now Westbrook's the triple-double king, But unlike Westbrook, Oscar does have a championship. He's made more All-Star games than Westbrook. And he was one of the best. He was one of the best ever. And he also had size on his side, similar to Magic Johnson. He's the fourth all time, in my opinion. And then fifth, if he wins a championship, Chris Paul. Maybe his game isn't as house of highlights on social media, flashy as a Russell Westbrook. Right? Westbrook's got the MVP. He's been to more conference finals. He's been to a finals back in 2012. But who affects winning? Russell Westbrook in his career has had Kevin Durant, James Harden, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, Domantas Sabonis, All-Star, Victor Oladipo, All-Star. Okay? Like he's had Bradley Beal, one of the best scorers in the game. He's had some dudes around him. Chris Paul. David West, no disrespect to David West, one of the OGs. David West was the second best player in New Orleans, and Blake Griffin was the second best player in LA with the Clippers. He had James Harden. He was the second best player to James, but we all know what James does in the playoffs. And then who was the second best player in OKC? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he's got a bright future, but he was a kid. He was 20 years old, right? And then he goes to Phoenix, where he finally has Devin Booker, scorer. DeAndre Ayton, one of the better big men in the game already. He's going to be one of the best big men in the league, if not the best, at some point in the future. Monty Williams, one of the best coaches. He's got a good mix of veterans. Jay Crowder, right? Like he's got dudes that have been in these situations, that have been in big games. And so we're talking about if he wins, obviously he'd be a champion, 11-time All-Star, one of the greatest ever. I mean, he has carried teams in his career to playoff appearances, to even laugh at this if you want, but semifinal appearances. Those Hornets teams and those Clippers teams and definitely OKC had no business in the positions that they ended up getting in, and he led them there. Everywhere he goes, he wins instantly. He's like LeBron. Even LeBron though, right? Obviously didn't win instantly in Cleveland. He was drafted there. They were awful. And then even his first year with the Lakers, it was pretty rocky. They missed the playoffs. He obviously had the groin injury on Christmas Day of that season. He had some lowlights that year. He still put up great numbers, but he had lowlights. Everywhere Chris Paul goes, he wins instantly. That's what he does. He's a winner. And so I listen, I still got the Nets winning the championship, and I will get to KD in literally just a second here. But I'm rooting for Chris Paul. I want to see him get a championship. He's put in the work. He plays the game, the right way. He represents the NBA as well as anybody. He's the president of the Players Association. He's in all those great State Farm commercials. He's one of, obviously he's I wouldn't call him a dirty player. I call him a what's the best word to use here? Well, borderline dirty. We'll just use that term. He's a cheap shot artist occasionally. Not as much as he used to be. He's a little older now, so he probably can't get away with some of that stuff. But he's one of the best to ever do it. I mean, you give me Stockton. Stockton had Karl Malone, second all-time leading scorer, and didn't win a championship. Stockton was great. He's number 6 on my list, but he won a championship. Steve Nash didn't win a championship. I didn't think he deserved either MVP that he won. Okay? Walt Frazier, 2-time champ, great, but he had some darn good teams around him back in the day with the Knicks. And Jason Kidd, his only championship came later in his career. And he put up, excellent numbers, a bunch of triple doubles and was one of the best ever. But as far as impact on winning, it's not up there with Chris Paul. Really, is any of these point guards? I mean, I'd say Magic and Steph, but outside of that, is any of these point guards affect winning as much as CP3? He's one of the best to ever do it. I think if Chris Paul wins a championship, the only point guards in the history of basketball better than him would be Magic, Steph, Isaiah Thomas, and Oscar Robertson. I'm putting him above Kidd. His only championship came, Jason Kidd, when he was later in his career and out of his prime. John Stockton, the man had Karl Malone and didn't win a championship. Steve Nash never even got to a finals. And, the 2 MVPs, I didn't think he deserved either of them. Definitely Shaq deserved the one over him. Okay, so and Walt Frazier, he was around some great teammates with the New York Knicks. So I'm putting Chris Paul above all those guys. I think he's the 5th best ever if he wins this year's championship. Considering what he's done in his career and considering his impact on winning basketball games at the highest level, that's what he does. That's what he continues to do at age 36. Give the man his respect. He does it the right way. So now to Kevin Durant. Now Kevin Durant, I've called on this show, maybe since the inception of the show, the best player in the world. With no disrespect to LeBron James, who is great. I thought LeBron was 2 up until about a month ago, and then I got LeBron behind KD and Steph. I think Steph's number 2 behind Kevin Durant. Okay, but he's great as they come. You've heard me talk about KD many times on the show. He's not fair. 7 feet tall, handles the ball like a guard, can shoot anywhere on the floor. He's a 90% free throw shooter, can pull up from 35. You know, he's got the fadeaway, he's got the mid-range, he's got the cross. He's got it all. He is an offensive cheat code. This is his moment. Game 5. Series tied 2-2. We all but buried the Milwaukee Bucks after Game 2 of this series when they trailed by as many as 49 and ended up losing by 39, as we have a comment here from 5AK. Hi there. Hey there, 5AK. How you doing? As far as Kevin Durant, there's been the knock in his career. I don't think it's that fair, but maybe it is. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow in the rest of the series, however long it lasts, that it is a fair knock. They say, hey, he didn't win a championship until he had Steph and Clay and Draymond and Iguodala and Steve Kerr as the head coach, all of which won a championship before he got there. Okay? And so he goes to Brooklyn where he has Kyrie Irving. It's like, okay, now Kevin Durant's got a chance to win a championship. He and Kyrie, that's enough to be a championship formula, I think. Certainly many people thought that. And then they had James Harden. Okay? And so now it's like you got Harden, Kyrie, KD. Well, this is kind of similar to Golden State, except for the fact that those two guys haven't won a championship together. James Harden hadn't won a championship at all. And Kyrie's, he was second fiddle to LeBron James back in 2016 when the Cavs won it. But here's the thing. Kyrie Irving. Woj came out about an hour ago. Kyrie's out tomorrow night. Game 5. Ankle injury. We saw him turn it yesterday. I am not a doctor. We got to preface what I'm saying with that. I'm not a doctor. But I'm not an idiot. Woj tweeted yesterday that Kyrie left the arena on crutches and in a walking boot. He is done for the series. He is done. I don't care what anybody says. There is no way Kyrie Irving's going to play the rest of this second round series against Milwaukee. If they advance, if the Nets advance, man, I don't know if he'll play in the conference finals. I'm serious. If you're leaving an arena in a walking boot and crutches, that's bad. Like, that is a serious deal. I don't think LeBron, when he tweaked his ankle back in March, I don't recall him leaving the arena on crutches and a walking boot. I don't think he did. He may have had a walking boot later on, but he didn't leave in crutches, and he was out for a month. So, very concerned with Kyrie Irving. And Steve Nash also said that James Harden is out for tomorrow night with that hamstring issue. I don't know if Harden comes back in Game 6. I doubt it. I always say about, hamstrings, back injuries, groin, they don't just go away. They don't. Those are injuries that linger. And by the way, James Harden injured his hamstring and missed all that time at the end of the regular season. I'm pretty sure it's the same hamstring that he tweaked 43 seconds into Game 1 of this series. This is Kevin Durant's moment. We got a tied series. It's basically a best of 3 now. First team to win the next 2 is going to the Eastern Conference Finals. People are going to look at Kevin Durant and say, okay, if you are that dude, if you are that best player in the world, can you get past Milwaukee? Because Milwaukee now is playing with all the momentum. It's crazy how the series can shift so quickly. Giannis played awful by his standards, by his 2-time MVP standards in the first 2 games of the series. Was great in Game 3, was even better yesterday. Chris Middleton stepped up big time in Game 3, was the best player on the court. Okay? And so you're looking. We saw how they played Kevin Durant defensively yesterday. We saw what PJ Tucker did. I mean, he was playing, 90s, early 2000s basketball on KD. He was as physical as he could possibly be. And look, he doesn't have a choice. He's 6'5". PJ Tucker is guarding 7-foot Kevin Durant. There's not much he can do except for grab him, right? And there were some calls I thought KD should have gotten. And then there were some where it's like the officials said, hey, that's the playoffs. It's more physical in the playoffs than the regular season. We all know that. Officials call it differently. So PJ played pretty good defense on KD. And so, he shot 9 for 25 from the field, scored 28 points. He got, 28, but again, it was like a James Harden type of stat line, 9 for 25 from the field. Like he struggled at times. And so no Kyrie tomorrow night, no James Harden tomorrow night. This is his moment. This will be, I think, defining moments of your career or your legacy. I think that gets thrown out way too much. I feel like every day, is this going to affect this guy's legacy? Is this going to affect this guy? This is one of those moments. This is one of those moments where we will look back with KD and say, he didn't have his second best player, James Harden, or his third best player, Kyrie. They had lost back-to-back games on the road when they could have easily won the third game. They had a 3-point lead with a minute left. Could have easily won the third game. It's a 2-2 series. It's a best of 3 at this point. What did Kevin Durant do the rest of the way? What did he do? Okay, so obviously Milwaukee can say now, and in Milwaukee, we all know they're a great defensive team. They can say now, okay, all of our focus is on Kevin Durant. If Joe Harris beats us, if Blake Griffin beats us, if Mike James beats us, if Nick Claxton beats us, okay, we'll live with that. But we are not letting that 7-foot monster, the best player on earth, beat us. We're just not, especially with the 2-star guards out. Okay, so Game 5, by the way, it's on your home floor. And we all know the Nets have been unstoppable at home. They had the 3 blowouts since Boston, albeit it was Boston. But without James Harden for the vast majority of the series, they embarrassed the Milwaukee Bucks in games 1 and especially in game 2. So you got to win game 5. You got to win because, if we go to a game 6, Nets have a 3-2 lead. If they don't have Kyrie or James Harden and, the Bucks get out to a good start, they could say, you know what? Let's not play KD too many minutes. We've got a game 7 on our home floor. Let's see if we can get the other 2 stars healthy for a game 7 and give ourselves a good chance to win on our home floor. But game 5 tomorrow night, we've seen LeBron do it. We've seen LeBron when he hasn't had another all-star teammate. We've seen Steph do it. Okay? We've seen these great players. We saw Magic Johnson back in, 1980 against the Philadelphia 76ers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is hurt. What did Magic Johnson do? He changed positions. He played center that night. And it was probably the most iconic moment of his NBA career. He did that as a rookie, by the way. KD, he's always had the last few years, and I think he's the best player. But he's always had the stacked deck. He's always had the best team on the floor. Back in Golden State, who on earth was beating KD, Steph, Clay, Draymond, Iguodala? Who was beating that? Who's beating KD, James Harden, Kyrie Irving? With a nice mix of Blake Griffin and Bruce Brown and Joe Harris. Who's beating that? So this is his moment now. Because people always said, oh, there's an asterisk. And listen, I'm not one who believes there's asterisks next to championships. Okay? I think the Lakers were bubble frauds, as were the Heat, by the way. Laker Nation, don't get on me. I think the Heat also and the Celtics were bubble frauds, considering what they did this year. That does not mean I put an asterisk next to the Lakers championship. I don't put asterisks next to rings. You won the championship. Okay? You don't put asterisks next to that. Did you get breaks? Yeah. Okay? And you took advantage of them. I believe you deserve points for taking advantage because too often in life and sports, if someone gets a break, sometimes people don't take advantage of it and, it costs them. Okay, so the Lakers did. The Raptors in 2019 when Golden State was hurt did. Okay, and we can just continue to go on and on and on. about the past few NBA champions. Or really every NBA champion has gotten breaks, whether it's health, whether it's, maybe a call going their way, whatever. Okay. This is it. I think a lot of people say, there's an asterisk, Dirk's ring in Dallas back in 2011 means more than KD's 2 rings in 17 and 18. Okay. I disagree with it, but I may have to rethink that if he doesn't show up, if the Nets end up getting eliminated. Because I know if we had, how old's KD? 33 years old, something like that? 32, 33. When LeBron was this age, we had no doubt. We're like, hey, you still got LeBron James. If you got that man, you always got a shot. And we trusted that LeBron, even without an all-star teammate, this is why I think he's the second best player to Jordan, because he's done this time and time again. When he's not had the best team on the floor, he's been able to carry them. KD's never really been in this position to have to drag a team. And even this Nets team, I think, was a lot better than some of those Cleveland teams LeBron was on. In his first stint there and in his last year there. I mean, you still have Joe Harris, 50% three-point shooter, although he has struggled the last 2 games, but he's great at home. You still do have Blake Griffin. We don't know if he's healthy, but if he is, he's been a major contributor for this Nets team. You still got Bruce Brown, who's been great off the bench all year for you. You've got Nick Claxton, rim protector. You've got pieces. You've got a decent cast around you. If you're that great, if you're the best player on earth, I'm not saying without KD and James Harden, or without James Harden and Kyrie, the Nets should go win the championship, because I don't think they can. But this series, you just got to win 2 games. And you still have home court. Even with the Bucks' last 2 wins, you still got home court. You don't have to win a road game. You don't have to go in Milwaukee and win. Unless you lose game 5, obviously. So I think tomorrow night, I believe it's at 8:30, if I remember correctly. Let me check so I don't get this wrong. Tomorrow night at 8:30 Eastern on TNT. It's the only playoff game on Tuesday. Everybody's going to be watching. So here we go. This is I believe one of the defining moments in KD's career. I'm not saying without KD and James that he needs to go win the finals. I don't think he can. I don't think you could throw a prime Jordan or a prime LeBron on this team and then go win a championship. It's not a shot at the Nets. I just think there's too much talent out there for them to do it without a second star. But this series, you got to make it happen if you're Kevin Durant. If you're that dude, if you're the best player on the planet, which I believe he is, you got to show up right now. Because back when LeBron was the best player on the planet in 2018, and he was trailing series against the Celtics, he's putting up, just ridiculous numbers, 40-point game after 40-point game, and dragged that Cleveland team to the NBA Finals. He dragged them. So we have a comment here from 5AK. He says, agreed. And he also says, time to show up. It is. This is it. Time to show up. Because, listen, I'll tell you this. If KD does play great and they do win this series without their other 2 stars, he'll gain a lot more respect from former players and current players that say, oh, the only reason you got those 2 rings is because you were with a loaded team, a team that won 73 games and had a championship before you joined them and made it darn near unfair, right? He'll gain a lot of respect because, okay, he can still win even when he doesn't have stars. LeBron did it. Can KD do it? Because that's KD, we all know. That's kind of the guy he looks at as wanting to be better than, as wanting to be greater than. Here's your moment. Here you go. Can you make it happen? I think he's capable of doing that. I think he's that great. But he's got to show us. Milwaukee will have the better team. This will be one of the first times in Kevin Durant's playoff career where the opposition has the better basketball team on the floor. We're talking about Giannis, 2-time MVP. Chris Middleton's played well the last 2 games. He's an all-star. Drew Holiday, one of the best defensive guards in the league. PJ Tucker, KD Fitz, Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, right? Milwaukee's going to have the better team on the floor tomorrow night. We've seen LeBron do it. Can KD do it? I think he can. I'm going to still take the Nets in 7 games as I did before this series started. I still believe they're going to win. You got to hey, game hasn't been played yet. You got to show us. So moving on from KD, let's see. What do we got next? Let's talk about Le'Veon Bell real quick. Le'Veon Bell at one point was probably the best running back in the league about 5 years ago when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the best all. He was basically Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, but better. For some of you newer NFL fans, with Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey, the 2 best do-it-all backs in the league, this dude was that, but better with the Steelers. He was the best running back in the league. He was one of the 5 best offensive players in the whole NFL, Le'Veon Bell was. And it started to go downhill about 2018 when he was in a contract battle with the Steelers. And what did we see when that happened? What have we seen in Green Bay? Aaron Rodgers has held out. And we've had all these teammates in Green Bay come out and support. David Bakhtiari went so far as to say, I go to the mountaintops and shout my support for Aaron Rodgers. So did Devontae Adams. So as these star players for Green Bay. They're on Aaron's side. What do we see in Dallas when this whole Dak negotiation that seemed to never end? What happened? All Dak's teammates are like, man, we just want him to get paid. We want to see this guy, after what he's done, after what he's been through on and off the field, this guy needs his money. This guy is the face of our franchise. He makes us what we are, and he can take us places. They came out and supported Dak. Not the case in Pittsburgh. Not the case. His teammates, hardly any of them had his back. What does that tell you? So he goes to the Jets. He actually sits out the entire 2018 season. Lost a lot of money because of that. Goes to the Jets 2019, average at best. Last year gets released by the Jets, gets signed by the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is where my story I'm about to talk about right now begins. So he tweeted over the weekend, Le'Veon Bell did, I'll never play for Andy Reid again. I'd retire first. First of all, he says that as if he has a choice. He may not play another NFL game because he just ain't that good anymore. I think that year off in 2018 kind of hurt him a little bit, as weird as that sounds, because came back with the Jets, was bad. Got released by the Jets midseason last year, got picked up by the Chiefs, and did virtually nothing. It did virtually nothing. So I look at this and I'm like, hold on. Of all the coaches you could bash, first of all, I don't know why you're bashing any coaches right now. You're a free agent. I think you're trying to get signed. I don't know why you're bashing anybody. You as a free agent, you keep your mouth shut because you just want to get on. You want to be on an NFL team. Andy Reid. He bashes Andy Reid. Everybody loves Andy Reid. Players, coaches, fans, everybody loves Andy Reid. I mean, not Donovan McNabb. Michael Vick. We all know the story. He was, the human video game when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. He's probably the greatest Madden, the video game Madden NFL. He's probably the greatest player in that game's history. And then he obviously got arrested for the whole issue with the dogs. And so he got arrested. And once he was out of prison, he's looking for a job. Who gives him that opportunity? Andy Reid. And Mike Vick was really good in Philadelphia. You ask Mike Vick about Andy Reid, he talks about him like he is his dad. He loves that man. Why? Andy Reid gave him a second chance. Andy Reid's given a lot of players second chances. Right? He loves his players. Matter of fact, by the way, how about Terrell Owens? Terrell Owens had a problem with everybody. Had a problem with everybody. Teammates, coaches. I remember they did an episode of A Football Life for T.O. And they, Steve Young was on there talking about it. Steve Young was one of the people they interviewed. And at the end of the episode, they told Steve Young, they said, you're actually the only former quarterback that played with T.O. that showed up for this interview. So that means Donovan McNabb did. We all know how the thing went down with McNabb. Who's the quarterback? I'm trying to remember. Was it Garcia in San Francisco? I think that was his name. He didn't show up. Donovan McNabb definitely didn't show up. And Tony Romo didn't show up. Steve Young was the only guy that did. So that tells you T.O. has no problem. T.O., who had a problem with everybody, speaks highly of Andy Reid. the media, and I think this is definitely fair, the media's criticism of Andy Reid has been he's not a disciplinarian. He's not like hard enough on his players. The lack of his team's discipline back in Philadelphia and at times these last 8 years in Kansas City, that has been a topic of criticism, right? Because it's like, how they have these great teams and them making these boneheaded mistakes in the playoffs that have cost them. Let's just go to most recently 2018 AFC Championship game against the New England Patriots. Chiefs got a 4-point lead with a minute left, and Tom Brady throws an interception and the game is over, except for the fact that D Ford was offsides. Now we can blame, obviously D Ford deserves blame. He was the one that was offsides. That would never happen under a Belichick coach team or a McVay coach team. Or throw out any coach you want, a John Harbaugh coach team. It's happened to Andy Reid coach teams, right? Why? Because he's just not disciplinary. It's not who he is. And so that's the criticism. Not that players hate Andy. Players love Andy Reid. And why wouldn't they, right? The personality, he's obviously one of the best offensive coaches ever. I'd say he's one of the 5 greatest offensive coaches of all time. Obviously, Bill Walsh is the best ever. But as far as offensive head coaches, Andy Reid's one of the best ever. As far as wins among head coaches, I think he's in the top. He might be in the top 5. He's not too far behind Belichick and Shula. I mean, this is one of the best coaches ever. And Le'Veon Bell, who's a free agent right now, he's not on a team, is out here dissing Andy Reid. I remember I was talking to 49ers fans after they lost the Super Bowl to Kansas City last year, back in Super Bowl 54. And 49ers fans said, yeah, man, that sucked, blowing a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. But if we had to do it against anybody, it'd be Andy Reid. The whole NFL world was happy for Andy Reid when he finally broke through and won that Super Bowl when he had that great Chiefs team a couple of years back. Everybody likes Andy Reid. Who doesn't? He's one of the, I always say, he's in that group of people. If you don't like Andy Reid, it's a you problem. You're the issue, not him. And so in this case, Le'Veon, I think you're the issue, not him. Teammates in your history have not exactly come out and had your back. That to me says a lot about you. So if you're wanting to get a job in the NFL, this is not the way to do it. By the way, look at your former teammate as a prime example of how to get back in the league if you have issues. Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown has way more issues off the field than Le'Veon Bell. Way more. But what did AB do? He had the whole issue in Oakland, back, the former Oakland Raiders. And, he signed that massive deal. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut for a week. And he was going to get paid more than any receiver in the history of the league. But he didn't. And he got released. And he was out of the league for a year. And so people are like, yeah, we know AB's got that ability. We've seen it time and time again. He was in position, if he kept playing, to possibly threaten, not break, but at least threaten some of Jerry Rice's records. Jerry Rice, best receiver ever. Probably probably has more unbreakable records than any player in the history of the game, in the history of the NFL. But he got in his own way, on and off the field, in the locker room with coaches, and he was a free agent for a year. What did AB do? I don't know what he did. We didn't hear anything from him. A year later, he gets signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and a report came out after they signed him that Bruce Arians told him, hey, he said, listen, man, if we have any BS, you're gone. We can't have you as a distraction. What does AB do? He goes about his business, and he plays a big, big part in the Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl. And he's back with the team. That's how you get back into the league if you have issues off the field. And again, AB had way more issues off the field than Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell, I don't think he hasn't been in any trouble with committing any crimes in a long time. AB has. Le'Veon hasn't. Le'Veon's problem is he's come out of shape to training camp. They said the Jets said last year he came in overweight. It's your fault you're out of the league. That's on you, man. So you don't get back in the NFL by bashing the most loved coach in the league. I mean, you don't even hear Belichick's players talk about him like this, ever. I mean, guys speak highly of, Teddy Bruschi and Willie McGinnis, some of the great Patriots of the past. They talk highly of Belichick, but not near as highly as Andy Reid's former players. And you're dissing this guy? That's on you. that's on you, man. So, hopefully Le'Veon gets back in the league and shows us maybe some signs of what he was in 2016, 2017. But his prime has passed him by. We're not going to see that Le'Veon again, and he is not helping his case to get back in the NFL by just bashing Andy Reid. Like literally nobody bashes Andy Reid. Everybody loves him, even players like T.O. How many beefs does T.O. have? He ain't got one with Andy Reid. Everybody loves Andy Reid. So I don't know what Le'Veon's thinking here. Maybe he wants to be. Maybe he's resigned to the fact that his NFL career is over. Maybe that's what it is, and he's just kind of trying to get in the news again. I don't know, but I don't know. He said also, I won't ever forget what that man said to me, referring to Andy Reid. I'm like, what did he say to you? Like, you're acting like he said something like bad. I mean, come on, Andy Reid ain't saying nothing to nobody. So stop capping. Let's get to Nikola Jokic. And I talked about earlier in the show. I'm not going to get into the whole MVP thing. He's not the MVP. Whatever. Chris Paul was more valuable. Steph Curry was more valuable. Joel Embiid was more valuable. But let's talk specifically about last night. So Game 4, obviously the Nuggets are down 3-0. Season on the line. They're trying to extend it, not get swept. And Jokic whacks Cameron Payne, backup point guard for the Suns. Cameron Payne has the ball, and Jokic, a frustration play, whacks Cameron Payne upside the head. And obviously, some of the bench is clear. Devin Booker gets up in his face. Devin Booker, by the way, should not have gotten a technical foul. Taking up for your teammate, it drives me crazy when officials hand out technical fouls when guys are standing up for their teammates. That drives me crazy. Like, if that ref was in the same position, man, I think you'd do the same. And so they assessed Jokic a flagrant 2. Now, if you get a flagrant 1 and another flagrant 1, you're ejected. If you get a flagrant 2, automatic. Right? Like, the flagrant 2 is basically saying it was a dirty play and has no business in the game. Let me say this. I will defend Jokic here. Was it a dirty play? Yes. Was it unnecessary? No question. You don't just whack a dude upside the head. Should he have been ejected? Absolutely not. You don't throw out the NBA's most valuable player in a playoff game. Unless it's just, you got to be bad. You got to be like Steph Curry throwing a mouthpiece at an official. That deserves an ejection. I don't care if Steph Curry's the MVP. He needs to be thrown out of the game. But it was a dirty play. Draymond Green kicked Steven Adams 3 times in the whole series. He did it 3 times back in 2016, the Western Conference Finals, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Kicked Steven Adams in the private parts. Never even got a suspension. Never got a flagrant 2. None of it. Because the official was like, yeah, that was dirty. That was really unnecessary. But we're going to hand him a flagrant 1 and keep moving. You don't throw marquee players out of games in the playoffs. You just don't. It's got to be egregious. Like I mentioned, Steph throwing his mouthpiece at an official. Okay, you can't. That can't happen. You got to throw your guy out. But if it's arguing with an official or maybe a dirty play, it was his head. It wasn't like he was going at his ankle. And I get it. It's a dangerous play. But you can't throw the MVP out of a playoff game. You just can't. Okay? This is Denver's season on the line. Obviously we all know Phoenix was up 3-0. Phoenix was going to win the series. It didn't change the outcome of the series. I don't even know if it really changed the outcome of the game. But marquee players, you don't eject them. You just don't. They're too valuable. They're too important to the game to throw them out. Now, as far as Jokic, man, I don't know what the heck he was thinking, whacking Cameron Payne like that. I don't know what he was doing. He lost it there for a minute. I don't know what he was thinking. You got to know how valuable you are to your team. And you can't just go whacking point guards around in the head. You just can't do that. But should he have been ejected for it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You don't do that. Okay? You don't just throw one of the game's best players, one of the top 10 players in the league, out of a game. In a playoff game, by the way, where his team's season is on the brink. You just don't do it. In the regular season, if Jokic got ejected, I got no problem with it. I got no problem. And Jokic got to keep a better head. He should have gotten a flagrant one, and you keep moving. But we all know the NBA is a business. We all know how important the star players are to the NBA. You can't throw one of them out of a game. You can't. So, listen, I mean, I'm not one. Listen, anybody that watches the show knows me that it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts when fans blame officials for the loss because I'm like, no, your team made mistakes that could have put you in a position to not need a call from the ref. You get what I'm saying? But officials messed up last night in two ways. They threw Jokic out, and they gave Devin Booker a technical for standing up to Jokic and taking up for his teammate who just got whacked across the head. You shouldn't give a guy a technical for standing up for his teammates. You don't do that. So, I'm normally one who defends officials most of the time, but today, today's not one of those days. They messed up. So last topic, we got 2 NBA playoff games tonight. Got the Atlanta Hawks in the first game taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. That is game 4. The Sixers got a 2-1 lead. I had Atlanta winning game 3. I was very wrong on that. Sixers played excellent. I had this series going in 6 games before it started. I will take the Hawks tonight. If they lose tonight, I think it's over in 5. Philadelphia. Well, I already got Philadelphia winning game 5 anyway. So obviously, if the Sixers win tonight, they'll win the series on. I guess that'd be Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday night. And if the Hawks win game 4, I think the Sixers will win the next 2. So regardless, I'm not going to pick the Hawks in any other game the rest of the series. But I'm going to have them winning game 4 tonight. It's an electric atmosphere in Atlanta. Obviously, we all know Trae Young has struggled at times against this Philadelphia team outside of game 1. And so I think putting Ben Simmons on him, who probably should have been Defensive Player of the Year, that's definitely given Trae problems because of Simmons' length, agility. He's one of the best defenders in basketball, and so that's definitely given Trae problems. But I think the other guys for Atlanta is going to step up. Capella has been bad the whole series. Embiid has just given it to him, so I don't expect much from Capella. But guys like Bogdanovich, John Collins, Herter, they got to step up. They got to step up for Atlanta to win this game. I think they will. I think it'll be close, come down to the end. And I'm going to take the Hawks to win tonight. I guess I got to throw out a score. Let's go. I think it'll be kind of a physical game. Atlanta knows how important this game is. They know they can't go down 3-1. Let's see. I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks winning this game. I'm going to go a little lower scoring. I'm going to go 98-95. Atlanta wins tonight 98-95 and ties the series up. I still think Philly wins regardless, though. And then the next game tonight, looking forward to this one. 10 Eastern, TNT. We got game 4, Jazz Clippers. Jazz have a 2-1 lead. I had Jazz in 6 before the series started. I'm going to take Utah. I'm going to take Utah to win tonight on the road in LA. They, got it handed to them. Completely got handed to them in game 3 on Saturday night. Kawhi Leonard played outstanding. Paul George played outstanding. And Donovan Mitchell is clearly not 100% right now. He's clearly not 100%. That ankle area seems to be bothering him. So I think that absolutely plays factor. But I'm going to take the Jazz to win tonight. I think it's close. I think Kawhi's going to be great. Maybe even Reggie Jackson's great. Reggie Jackson is making a name for himself as not just the guy who's named after Mr. October from another sport. Reggie Jackson's playing well. But I think we're gonna get a bad case of the pandemic P. I think it's gonna happen tonight because now there's a little expectation on the Clippers, like, oh, okay, you won game 3, you're not gonna get swept. You're just gonna go and win this game at home, and it's not gonna happen. I'm gonna take the Jazz to win tonight, 110-102. Utah wins tonight, 110-102. They go up 3-1. And I actually got the Clippers winning game 5 and the Jazz closing them out in LA in game 6. That's how I think that'll play out. So I've got basically, I'll tell you how these two series are going to play out. I got Atlanta winning tonight. I got a score 98-95. And Philadelphia wins the next two to advance to the conference finals. And then I'm going to take the Jazz to win tonight, Clippers to win game 5, and the Jazz to close the Clippers out in game 6 and advance to the Western Conference Finals to play Phoenix. So there you go. There's my predictions. I've been up and down. I've had some hot streaks. I'm in the midst of a little bit of a cold streak right now with my predictions, but I feel good about these tonight. So that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you all so much for watching or listening on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. If you've been listening to Carving Up Podcasts, you've been listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Catch us Thursday, as always, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, wherever you watch the show. So hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy the next few days. Continue to stay safe. God bless you all. And as always,